After the knee wrap video, I had a lot of people asking, Seth, what is the best way to wrap my elbows for bench? Well, here is step number one to the best elbow wrap you've ever had. Don't wrap your elbows. Now don't worry, the video's not over because this is actually going to be a wrist wrap tutorial. But first, let's talk about why I think wrapping elbows is one of the stupidest things a lifter could do on their bench press. Number one, you don't get to wear elbow wraps in competition. The only legitimate reason to wrap your knees in a powerlifting squat is if you are going to be competing in knee wraps. That's the only reason someone should wrap their knees. If they're wrapping their knees for pain, they should be doing something to build their knees up so that their knees don't hurt. If they want to just overload a squat, there's way less pain in the ass ways to overload a squat, and the exact same things can be said for bench press. If your elbows hurt and you're trying to make them hurt less by wearing wraps, quit just putting a freaking band-aid on it and do something to train your elbows to build up the tolerance. Manage loading on your pressing work so that you're not aggravating it, so that you can allow the tolerance to be built up. And if you're looking to overload a bench press, just put on a slingshot. You're going to be overloading a bench press, and you're going to be overloading the things that need overloading, because the difference between a slingshot and an elbow wrap is an elbow wrap is taking away tricep demand, whereas a slingshot is taking away pec shoulder and allowing you to stress the triceps more. Most bench pressers have weak triceps and need more triceps work, and that is why a slingshot can be very valuable. But if you're just putting on elbow wraps to overload, you're taking away triceps demand. And sure, someone might say, but Seth, I want to overload my pecs. Just do a freaking dumbbell fly and you're going to be able to overload your pecs way better with way less of a pain in the ass than putting on elbow wraps. Rant over. And now that that's out of the way, wrist wraps. Now, the reason I'm pro wrist wrap when I'm anti elbow wrap really just comes back to the reality that wrist wraps are legal to use in competition, and they are going to help you lift more in a way that actually helps your competition bench. And if we're powerlifters, we want to have a better competition bench. And if you're bodybuilders, if we can add stability to a joint that does not need to move and is not being challenged and is not going to be contributing to tissue growth in the movement, we should stabilize that joint so that the other joints can work better. Again, this goes back to the whole wrapping elbows on bench. If you want to overload your pecs by wrapping your elbow, just do something that's better pec training instead of wrapping your elbows. But that's beside the point. I don't need to rant some more. So when it comes to wrist wraps, the biggest mistake that I see people doing is that they forget that it is a wrist wrap, not a forearm wrap, not a hand wrap. It's not just a fancy elastic sweatband. So the most important thing is that the wrist wrap needs to actually cover the wrap. The second most important thing that I see people screwing up is that most wraps come with this fancy dancy thumb loop that lifters want to put around their thumbs, and then they wrap around, wrap around, wrap around. The problem with this thumb loop is that, number one, you can't have the loop on your thumb in a powerlifting meet. And number two, if the loop is on your thumb and you tie the wrap tight enough, it's a pain in the ass to get the loop off of your thumb, and it can lead to some awkwardness if your bar is loaded and you're scrambling trying to get the thumb loop off of your thumb while trying to rush your ass to the platform. So, how I start my wrist wrap, step number one is I'm going to take the corner of the wrap, I'm going to place it dead center in my hand. I'm going to tag it with my middle finger, and that's going to secure the wrap. I'm not going to touch the thumb loop. I'm not like holding the thumb loop. I'm not doing anything with the thumb loop. This is the most consistent and most reliable way for me to anchor my wrist wraps. Step number two is I'm just going to pull this wrap around, and then I'm going to tag it again and hold on to it with my fingers so that it does not fly away. As I'm wrapping the wrist, you'll notice that I'm patterning down the forearm and then patterning back up the hand. This is ensuring that as I'm wrapping the wrist, that wrist joint is actually getting covered, because similar to the knee wrap, we actually want coverage on the joint so that we have stuff above the joint, we have stuff below the joint. Having stuff above and below the joint, but not super spread out and kind of packed right around the joint, is going to make sure that that wrap is a freaking cast and that wrist cannot move. Like I was saying, one of the biggest mistakes you'll see lifters make when they're wrapping their wrists is that they're just going to tie the wrap on their forearm below the hand, and then their wrist is free to flop in the breeze. We don't want floppy wrists. We want solid, strong, casted wrist wraps so that when we are pushing into the bar, that wrist is locked solid and we can transfer force to that barbell as effectively as possible. So to recap, important things for wrist wraps: grab onto the wrap, don't use a thumb loop. Step number two, well, important thing number two, not step number two, because there's a lot of steps to that kind of whole wrapping deal is that we want to make sure that we're patterning the wrap in a way that we actually get coverage over the joint, because if we don't have coverage over the joint, it's not going to help us stabilize the joint. So having a little bit of up and down alternation is going to help us out with making sure that wrist joint is locked in and secure and cannot move when we are under the barbell. So guys, hopefully that helps you get a better, more solid wrist strap, which then leads to better, more solid bench press. And thank you so much for watching. Peace out. Have a good rest of your day.